Hi, welcome. My name is Gary, and I am the community manager here at BoxCast. And today, I'm going to show you how to get your audio from your mixing console into your live stream. So let's get started. Mixing audio can be a complicated system, and we've got a couple of other videos already set up and ready for you to see how you can learn how to mix and set up your own console when it comes to actually doing mixing in your live house. But no matter what type of audio console you have, whether it be, say, this analog console over here, or a digital console like this X32, bringing your audio over into your live stream isn't really that complicated. So I want to give you some approaches and some methods to help get you an understanding of how that is able to be done, whether you're using analog or digital. So let's focus on analog. So for our analog console, we really only have a couple of options, okay? Some analog consoles are going to come with multiple aux sends, okay? And you'll see those are focused literally right here in the middle of the console. And they're basically just outputs from the back of the console going out to wherever you need it to go. Most times that's like a stage monitor. We've covered that before in our aux video explaining how aux sends are different than matrix sends or mix buses. But here on an analog console, this particular one only has one actual out, and that's the effects channel, which can be used as an aux send. And we can actually manipulate that by sending that aux send out to somewhere. The difficulty with analog consoles is that they only really have two ways to get your audio stream to go out. One is using the aux send so you can mix it, which means you're usually mixing like the effects channels here or the aux channels individually per channel, or you're going to split the main outputs to then spit that off. Now, some consoles will have an RCA connector like this, where it's taking your entire mix, the full mix, and it's putting it through the RCAs. Doesn't matter what the mix sounds like, it's going to go out that way. And there's really no way to change that unless you're doing some physical mixing with the console as you would for in your mains or in your house, okay? But on a digital console, you actually get almost double, sometimes more than that, in options for how to mix. And that's today what I'm going to focus on is with the digital console. More and more churches are moving to digital consoles. And that's good because digital consoles offer a lot of flexibility and a lot of options. Here with my X32, I have a myriad of ways to send audio. One of the primary ways that we send audio is using a mix bus. Here on our digital console on the X32, this is a mix bus set. And with this mix bus, I can actually create a submix out of our console and into our live stream. And I'll explain how we do that here in just a second. Another option is using what's known as a matrix. So I can send a matrix send, which is a copy of our full main house mix, and send that copy to a matrix and then tell the console to send it out to our live stream. Another option is using something like this. This is a P16M monitor. This is actually a personal in-ear monitoring system that you would use, say, on stage for your instruments or for your vocalists. They would jack into this. The signal will come in digitally through an Ethernet cable, and then they would be able to, through routing and control in the console, they'd be able to select which channels they want to hear more of and then turn that volume up or down, creating a personal mix for their own ears. Now, these are really a good option if you're just a little timid with how to do submixing using a mix bus, for example, or if you're a little more timid on how to get your copies over from your mains into your matrix. But with this is a great option because it's portable, it's light, and it can be set somewhere else, and all you have to do is just send a digital signal to it. We'll get into this later. The last option is to use a DAW, or digital audio workstation, something like Logic, Waves, Ableton, and sending your audio from your console out of the USB or through a network connection into that digital audio workstation. Now that DAW would be set up with a lot of presets and it would process your audio for you so you can send it out to your live stream. We're not going to get into that today because that is a very heavy topic and there's a lot of ways to do it. So I want to focus on the first two, which is going to be our mix bus and our matrix, and then I want to highlight how to use the personal in-ear system to do mixing for your live stream at your church. Let's talk about some setup. So setup can be done in a myriad of ways. Generally, you're going to use either like an XLR cable, you can use a 1/4-inch cable, you can use an RCA cable, you can use Ethernet, and you could use USB. But you need to determine what connection type you're going to use and how that's going to go to, say, into your encoder, whether that be a physical encoder, such as something like the BoxCaster or BoxCaster Pro, or it's going to be a non-physical connection like Ethernet or USB going into, say, your computer system like OBS or Wirecast, okay? Once you've got that determined, you're generally going to make sure that you have all those pieces and parts ready to be set up. You're going to have everything turned on, and then you're going to get some music set up. Maybe that's Spotify playing into your console, or like what I have here is I'm using Logic to do a virtual band into our console. So with that, you can then begin to test, modify, and configure everything you need to do. So now, if we're using an analog console for this method, we are going to use the aux sends off of the analog console. Again, this console here has an effects channel that acts as an audio aux send, or they have a split here from the mains, which is an RCA connection. But for this, I want to show you just kind of down the line how this works. We call this the channel path, and I want to show you how the channel path works so you understand how everything gets associated, okay? So in an analog console, you have your input, which is where you would plug in an XLR or a quarter-inch cable, and then that goes through the preamp. A preamp is really simple to understand. It's basically the ability to amplify that signal coming into the console. So that's gain, usually right here. There's a couple of pads or high-pass filters that can be used in that regard. Once that's done, there is an actual internal mechanism inside of this called a pre-fader, and that pre-fader sends that signal out of this and directly over to whatever your input would be for somewhere else. After it gets done, then that signal gets split off and goes into your highs, mids, and lows, or your EQs, and then can be affecting onto your aux send, which then gets filtered down to your pan, and then, of course, hits your actual audio level for your mixing out to your mains. Okay? Now, from here, this audio connection through this path is actually being routed one way, and it's going out to the outputs. Once you understand that the signal path is actually intersecting before this, that's called pre-fader. And that's important because that actually affects on a digital console as well. And then there's post-fader. So down here is post-fader. Post-fader means that after everything's been done with it, you're sending the signal out and it's being affected by this gain knob, or I'm sorry, this volume knob here. That means that any changes you make here are going to be reflective in your aux send. Okay, so with that understanding, let's move to the digital side so you understand that signal path, that actual signal chain, and how that channel path works. So here on our X32, most digital consoles are the same. Our X32 is taking our inputs in, and they're coming here to our config and preamp, which is where we set our gains and structure. And if you don't know how to set a proper gain structure, we have a video teaching you on how to do that and what the best practices are. But it comes to our gain structure, and then it hits all of our processing. So that would be our gates and our duckers, our dynamics, our EQs, all of our modifiers. And then that gets processed down into our channel, where we're able to actually configure and move that channel to affect our mains. So once we have the signal path coming into the channel, then we can process that out to, say, effects, for example, which I have some effects set up here. And we can tell the console where we want to tap these effects into. But most importantly, when we look at, like, say, the mix bus for mixing our console, we can tell the console whether we want it to be pre-fader or post-fader. And actually, we have a few more options. We can tell the console to be any one of these options here. So we can have a custom, inline, pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre-fader, post-fader, and subgroup. So real quick, inline, okay, or left center is basically, it's inline with the entire console. It's what the signal is being received by the console. Pre-EQ means it's getting received by the console, and then we're tapping in before the equalizer, before the EQ settings. Post-EQ means that we're tapping in past the EQ settings. Pre-fader means that we're tapping in post the preamp, but not including any of our processing, including our gates, duckers, and EQs, okay? And then post-fader means that we're then taking it all the way down here to where it's being affected by our actual fader level, which is actually handling the master mains out, okay? So I know that seems like a lot, but really the two that you should focus on should be pre and post fader. Now I have my subgroup here set to post fader, which means as I'm playing music in or bringing a signal in, the more I adjust this, the more it gets affected here in our mix bus. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding as to how those aux sends and how those masters and those individual channel sends are working and where we can tap into, let's focus on how we actually get our digital console to send that audio outbound. So I love this part of mixing and sending audio to other places because it's really a cool way to show how we can send audio in different ways and how we can get audio to different places and do it very effectively, very quickly. Okay, so here on our X32, I have a virtual band set up through our Logic Pro DAW system. I have set the console in a couple ways. I'm going to walk you through this. We have all of the inputs mapped according to what the inputs are coming in over USB from the Logic system from the DAW. I have all those mapped here, and there's 20 channels being utilized, all different signal types. There's no EQ, there's no gates, there's no duckers, there's nothing being processed, and there's definitely no effects processed. I have everything listed here in a mix bus, so I've created a stereo mix bus. I want to tell you one thing about stereo versus mono, and this is an important thing you want to understand. If you're running mono in your house, which means you're running one channel, which is usually left. If you're running right, then we need to talk. But if you're running left, if you're running mono audio, that's great. Your house does not need to be stereo. There are a lot of places that run stereo, and that's good for them. But for easy setups, mono is always perfect, okay? Here, though, we want a digital signal to be stereo. We want that signal to go out to our live stream in stereo. We do not want a mono signal, because when somebody has headphones on or they're listening on their device, they're only going to hear, that's right, one side of the audio if it's mono. But if they hear stereo, they're hearing two. Doesn't mean that you have to do any special things with that, like panning left or right or adding effects to left or right. It just means that they can hear it out of both ears in both channels, left and right audio. So we always set up a dual input and output system. So here it is with the mix bus being 2, and then we've linked that. The easiest way to understand that is if we go here into our mixing console and we select either one of our mix buses. On the console it says link. We can tap that and ask us to confirm if we want to join the 2 buses together. And now whenever I adjust the faders, you'll see that they're both being adjusted. That means whatever audio is going into this channel, into this output, this mix bus, is also being duplicated and put into the other mix bus. It makes it very super convenient, so you're only having to mix one thing. You're not mixing 2 or 3 at a time. So let's get into actually getting into some of the mixing and how the routing works. So here on our mix bus, I have this set up, and I'll go here to our routing so you can see it. But here in our outputs, I have our mix bus set up as 7 and 8 on the back of our digital console here, our X32. And I've told our system that 7 is left and 8 is right. And then I've mixed that and set that up as a mix bus, and then I've configured mix bus 1 and 2 to be that. Once you have this set up, you can do it for anything. Honestly, you can set these outputs to anything. It could be an aux out, such as a 1/4-inch cable in the back. It could be a XLR out. It could be a card out. Maybe you want to send it digitally over the USB. It can be anything. As long as you set the output, then you're going to use these outputs on the back of the console where you're telling these channels that this is what you're sending. It'll get sent there. And that's how the routing works on this. So I've gone ahead and set that up already for us. And in turn, I'm going to go back into our actual mixing side, and I'm going to show you what the differences are. So here, we're working right now on our audio that's inputting into the console. We're not affecting anything in the mix bus at the moment. But this button here, Sends on Fader, this is how we actually can begin to mix audio strictly for our mix bus. Commonly, this is called submixing. And the way submixing works is that instead of mixing the house audio, you're now mixing the sub audio. Typically, this is done for like monitors or maybe a stage display. Maybe you're sending it out to a nursery. But in this system, we're sending this out to a live stream. So now we're going to be able to create a custom mix for the live stream. All right. So once I hit Sends on Faders and I select the channel that I want to begin mixing into, you'll now see that I have a complete submix. So if I go in here and I make adjustments to these and I then hit Sends on Fader, my main mix has not changed. And that's the beauty of a mix bus. You're getting a custom mix for your live stream. So as long as you've got that set up to be connected on the output, heading into your computer or heading into your encoder, whatever you choose to mix on those mix buses will not affect the mains. Okay? I'll bring these back up. Okay. So now let's begin to do a little bit of a mix. So I'm going to go in here and I'm actually going to go ahead and take everything out of these mix bus channels right now. And I'm solely going to work on the Sends on Fader. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring our digital console up to speed by sending in some virtual playlist music here that I've got pre-queued from a virtual band. You're not going to hear anything right off the bat because I'm not sending audio. And you would know that because these inputs are receiving audio, but the mix bus is not. And that's key to say, hey, I'm actually getting audio into the live stream. If you see this and it's blank, nothing's happening, you haven't put anything into the mix bus. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build an actual mix into our live stream through our mix bus. So we'll hit Sends on Fader, and we'll select the mix bus that we're moving into, which is our live stream, and now we'll build our mix. Now, if you saw how to do our mixing basics video, we're going to start in the same fashion. We're going to start with all of our lows, and we're going to work all the way up to our highs and then do our vocals. So let's begin to that. So right now, this is a very large track. It's 20 tracks that's coming in as a digital virtual band, and so we've got multiple microphones miking different things. So we'll start with our kick drum here. And the way that they mic these is that they have one mic that's on the outside of the drum and one that's actually inside of the drum. So you're actually going to get two different mix versions. One will be a little more thumpy and a little bit will be a little bit more slappy. All right, now we'll bring in our snares. Again, they mic the top and the bottom snare, so we'll bring in our snare. Should be getting some snap in there when he snaps on it. And again, we can tell when there's a signal coming in because we can see it physically actually manipulated here inside of the board. We can actually see it coming in. Okay, so let's continue with the rest of our drums. We'll bring in our toms. And now we'll bring in our hi-hats and then overheads. Now the overheads here are just adding a little flavor into the drum kit. They're making it fuller, okay? So we're just gonna have that there. So sounds good with the drum mix. Okay, now we're gonna bring in our bass. So this bass is a heavy bass or a gritty bass, like a dirty bass, and then a regular bass that's distortion and then the actual bass below it. Now we'll bring in our acoustic guitar. And then they have a second one, which is actually just miking a little further away. And then we'll bring in our electric guitars. And now we'll bring in our keys. All right, and so the last thing to do is bring in our vocals, okay? You have to be very careful with bringing in vocals. Vocals seem to always have like a little higher, they're a little more crisp, so mixing them is a little bit better when you do it slowly and you do it a little less aggressiveness. So we'll bring in some of our vocals here, just to where they're over the top of the vocal or the instruments. So that's how we build a mix. We've got our mix, and now it's actually going into our live stream. And the way that I know it's going into our live stream, is that it's coming out and you can see the signal path going in the mix bus, but also on the flip side of that, you can actually hear it. We're recording it, and it's coming out into the recording. So this is the best method for doing this, is by just setting up the mix bus and then making a custom mix, okay? Later, we'll show you how to add a little flavor to that in another video on how to add your effects to it and your EQs and all that jazz. But this is the first and primary method. It's the easiest way. All right, now let me show you how to use a matrix send to send all the audio from your digital mixing console into your live stream. The benefit of doing this really is that it offers you the ability not to have to create a submix. Sometimes you have to actually have like a secondary person sitting there mixing the submix, maybe on another device, or you're the only one who's mixing audio, so you're having to switch between sends on fader and go to the mix bus, or you're having to mix the house. Like if something didn't sound right in the house, then you have to also adjust it in your live stream through the mix bus. So the benefit of doing this though, actually means that you can take whatever you're sending your house mix and you can send it directly to your matrix send, okay? So with that, let me show you how to set that up. So right now we have a matrix send. I've got the matrices here on the matrix main button for the console, and I haven't got any audio coming into our main mix right this second. So we'll go ahead and play the mix band, the virtual band, and as you can see, we're getting signal into the input. Now, with setting this up, it's actually just as easy as doing everything else. We're going to go to our routing. We're going to go to our output here, okay? And we're going to say, hey, we're going to set up 7 and 8. Right now they're set to the mix bus. We're just going to change them over to the matrix. So we're going to say matrix out, and matrix 1 is left, which is 7, and we're going to go matrix 2, which is out. And again, you now have the option to do a tap. Remember, we talked about that earlier, where you can tap it pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre-fader, post-fader, and we like to leave it at post-fader, okay? That way you're getting everything you need, and it's being affected in there. So now, if I were to bring this audio up, we should see it come in the mains, and then we should start seeing signal. Once we bring the audio adjustment here to the matrix up, we should start seeing some audio come in, and you should hear it as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring this up to 0, and we have our mains here, and so again, we're going to build our mix. We're going to start with the subs. You should start to hear that now. Bring our snare in. Bring in our toms, our hi-hat, and then our overheads, giving a little fullness to the drums. Bring in our heavy bass, our dirty bass, and our regular bass, and our acoustic guitar. And now here's our electric, and here's our second electric, and here's our keys. And now let's go back to our vocals. I always mix vocals last, and I always put them on the front page because it's easy to get to. So we'll bring in our vocals. Okay, so what you're going to see here, I'm going to bring this back so we can talk a little bit. So now what you're going to see here, all right, is that the way that this is working is like whatever I change here in the input section on the mains is going to be reflective. So if I were decided to just cut all the vocals, you will no longer hear them. So if you're in the middle of mixing your mains and you're using a matrix send, whatever you do on the house mix is going to be affected on the live stream. This has a benefit. It just means that you're not going to have to create a sub mix. So if your house mix is mixed really, really, really well, it means that your live stream mix should be mixed pretty well. And again, there are no EQ adjustments on this right now, and there are no effects, which we'll show you later. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So now that we've got our matrix set up and you've seen how we are able to send out through either a mix bus or through the matrix send by copying the mains over, let me show you one of the other easy methods that you can use to make sure that you're getting audio to your live stream using something like the P16M monitor, okay? All right, so let's take a look at the routing tab here so I can show you kind of what I did for setup. So inside of the X32 mixing console, you can set it to, and you can do this with a lot of different mixing consoles that are digital, but especially with Behringer or even the Midas version, you can actually set what's known as P16 out. You can tell it to digitally send out specific things to the P16 monitor. Now, the monitor is a really neat, nifty little tool here because it offers us the ability to send audio. It offers us the ability to send out audio to 16 different channels, and then you can customize the mix directly from this box. And so within X32, the actual software for routing, I've set our alternate P16 outputs, and I've just routed the specific things through. Now, some of these I've actually grouped into a mix bus, and I've told, hey, I want the P16 to pick up the mix bus, like I did our drums. I went ahead and did a few other pieces like the guitars that were double mic'd, or the bass that was double mic'd. And so now, and then our keys. So now we have 9 inputs coming into the P16 monitor. And so now I'm going to show you just a little bit of how we can actually get this set up to go to our live stream. And it's very simple. It's a lot easier than some of the connections on the back of the console, quite honestly. So on our P16, you can see that we have audio signals being coming in. And then through here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a 1/4-inch cable. Quick hot tip here, 1/4-inch cables come in 2 versions. They come in TRS and TRRS. And that here is where you can see the sleeve. So this is a stereo cable. If it was a mono, you would only have 1 black tip, 1 black line. This is 2. And so we're going to use a stereo cable, and we're going to connect it to either the phone's output area. Okay. Typically this is used for in-ears, so we're going to connect it to the phone's output area, or we're going to connect it to the line out here on the back, and then we would plug this in, and then now we can take this end of the cable and put it into our live stream. From here, the easiest thing to do is to listen with a pair of headphones to monitor the mix and then send it out to wherever we send it for the live stream. And we would do that by selecting our channel and then just increasing the volume or decreasing the volume based on how much we want to hear of that specific item or how much of it we want to not hear of that specific item. This also has onboard EQing, so if you were going to do some like mix mastering with the EQs and all that stuff, you could do that here. And then of course we have some limiters and levels. You can set recall, you can group some things. So you have a lot of functionality with this being a monitoring system on top of it being an actual thing that we're sending to a live stream. So that really sums up how we're going to get audio from our console to our mixing station, or from our console to our live stream. And so I hope you've learned a little bit about that. Let me leave you with some key things here, some things I want you to remember in the process as you're doing this. First and foremost, gain structure is super important here, because if you remember from our gain video, if you watched it, if not, check the link below. But from our gain video, gain sets up for everything. And if we have improper gain structuring in our console, it's going to have improper gain structure across the board. That's from all the way from our gates and duckers and EQs to our effects, all the way down the line to, say, using our P16 monitor. If the gain is not properly set, you're going to be affecting everything down the line. Each method has its upsides and its downsides. So if you choose to use the mix bus method, the upside is that you can create a custom mix. The downside is you have to create a custom mix. So you're not getting some autonomy there, but what you are having to do is create a custom mix in the system, and you have to manage it and monitor it on a regular basis. Okay? Whereas in our matrix is literally a copy of our main mix that we are already doing for our mains for inside of the house of worship, or in our event, and we're just copying that over to the matrix and sending that out to our live stream. And then again, one of the easiest methods is using the P16 monitor. There are some upsides and downsides to all of these. Just pick and choose, experiment. Go the route and experiment which one works for you, because not all different methods work for everybody. Everybody is mixing their audio into their live stream way differently, okay? And so determine what is the best for your audio live stream. It's really about personal preference, what's easier for you. If you have the manpower to do more people, then go ahead and do so. I would highly recommend that if you're using either the matrix or mix bus method, that you are using some sort of external source for mixing, like a computer or an iPad. These are fantastic to be connected to for iPads over the Wi-Fi network, because then you can actually mix from that. And these companies such as Behringer, Presonus, these companies such as Behringer, Presonus, Mackie, they all offer apps that you can run natively on a different device or a tablet, and you can mix and match however you need to, whatever you need to in the system. So, all right, well, that about does it for us. I am so glad that you came and joined us today in learning how to take our audio from our console to our live stream. If you have any questions, please post them down below in the comments area. And as always, happy streaming.